Welcome to the Go Beyond podcast. I'm your host, Charles Scott. On this podcast, I interview exceptional leaders navigating ambition, resilience, and growth. The goal is to help you go beyond your perceived limits. As always, this show is sponsored by the 90% rule, helping leaders escape the grind of the ambitious person's trap and spend over 90% of your finite time and energy on things you like, you're good at, and you find meaningful. What's the ambitious person's trap, you ask? That's when you trash your physical health and emotional health in pursuit of your professional goals. The 90% rule is the antidote. Go to executivementorcharlescott.com to learn more. Okay, on today's show, our guest is Ed Kuyper, CEO of Raytech Equipment, a manufacturing company based in Albuquerque that provides custom clean room solutions for semiconductor, biotech, and pharma companies. Ed, welcome to the show. Very happy to have you here.
Nice to see you again, Charles.
Yep, you too. So I'm going to ask you about Raytech Equipment in a minute, but before I do, I always like to start with this question. If you could go back in time and talk with your 18-year-old self, what advice would you give?
Well, the 18-year-old Ed Kuyper was kind of coming off of a childhood of, I was this early ADHD kid. I was on the clinical trials of Ritalin, and I had tremendous ambition and tremendous drive. And I was a bit of like a caged little lion that was stepping out into the world. And if I had gotten a chance to talk to him, I would tell him to make the first steps more into building the internal armor that you need for your life, as opposed to going out and trying to impress. So I was very driven by trying to come up with the most impressive degree. I did a physics degree and a graduate degree in math in engineering, and doubled in a math major barely. But like I was very keyed on that. And so sorry. But that was kind of where I was. And it took me a lifetime plus, or it took me many years to try and figure out what I was and bring inside and love what I was.
Yeah. Oh, I love that answer. And you reminded me, sometimes in my talks, I talk about the first adulthood and the second adulthood, a concepts that's been out there and talked about by a lot of interesting people, I think. And it's very common in your first adulthood to define success externally. And it's very common in second adulthood, the second half of life, to realize that it's much more about an authentic expression of yourself. So I think you're not alone. To the degree that you can, I hope you give yourself grace for that. But most of us could take that good advice. So
for sure.
Okay, so tell me about Raytech Equipment. So how did it start, and what is your vision? I know you didn't start the company, but you're leading it now. So what's your vision?
Yeah. So Raytech came about 30 years ago by the founder, who was a machine builder, kind of a self-made guy, and he was on a project up at Rio Rancho in New Mexico, where they were building the new Fab 11X, which was the largest fab at its time. And it was the first 300 millimeter volume fab and all these other things. But he had gotten in a conversation with somebody who was going to be building the gown room, which, by the way, for those of you who haven't been in and out of semiconductor fabs, you come in your street clothes, you come into a gown room, and you get on your bunny suit and everything and get set so you don't shed particles into the air when you're working with semiconductors. But they were going to build it all out of laminated particle board. And Kerry was running a metal shop, and he said, well, I could do all this out of stainless steel. It would last a lot longer, be easier to clean, and it's just going to work a lot better. And so they said, sure, go for it. So they started with building gown room equipment, dispensers, hangers, racks, benches, and all that kind of stuff. And through the years, they developed products for, workstations and carts and other things within the workspace of a clean room and in the gown rooms. And when I joined was about 2.5 years ago, after the company had sold, and then they were looking for a permanent CEO. And it was really living on reputation, but not they didn't like to travel or do trade shows or marketing. Like it was just a very pure, this is what we do, and you'll figure it out once you get our stuff. And my transformation of the company, other than kind of operational improvements, is to be able to tell the story of Raytech and why it's worth, what our value proposition is and what makes it different to work with us and what the benefits are, and getting that into, getting that out there without having to explain it every time.
Got it. No, it's and you are your background, I think suits you well for the current role. You and I share this common background of having worked at Intel Corporation. I was only there for 14 years. You were there for about 23 years. And so I'm curious, what did you learn? Were there any kind of key lessons from your experience there? And also, just as importantly, you decided to leave it, which is a big deal. I think a lot of people who work in big corporate environments fantasize about, maybe leaving and either running a company like you're doing or starting their own thing. So maybe also, in addition to what you learned, tell us about the decision to leave.
Yeah. So I started working for Intel in 99. And I'll say right off the bat, working for Intel gave me a tremendous sense of pride. I was so proud to be there. And the people that I worked with were became deep friends, but also, the superstars from your high school class, like they're working there, right? And I felt really honored to be in that group, and the complexity and what we were doing with semiconductor manufacturing. It was just this next level of science that is just mind blowing. I started off in the fabs owning a specific tool, and then moved into the yield engineering, which is basically the detective work of when a chip fails a test at the end, you go Columbo mode and try and figure out where it went wrong. And so I did that type of stuff for my first third. But, this combination of whatever this brain is, like I had a lot of curiosity about how other things worked. And so I got the opportunity to move into benchmarking, which was touring other fabs and a part of this Semitech industry consortium thing. And then when we tour the other fabs, we would find all their details of how they ran. And so I built a financial model that said, well, our costs are this. And based on what I learned about Samsung, their costs are that. So the second third of it was around finance work and financial modeling and those types of things. And then I really got more interested into the business side and less on the technical side. I got an MBA along the way, which Intel generously paid for. And I moved into business development for custom chips that were being made for Intel platforms, but doing all the contract negotiation and pricing negotiation and all the commercial side of that development. And then the next thing I did was working in marketing for the data center group and product management and the marketing of data center chips and platforms, including being a communication lead for when we had escapes. These are things when, oh, this chip is fine, but it gets to Google and there's a problem. So it was a lot of big emotions. And growing up in New Jersey, I was comfortable being sweared at a lot. So I just was able to sit in there, and I learned about conflict a lot and how you have to let the person who's upset get a chance to get everything out before you can get to a baseline to move forward. And that was one of the big lessons I've learned, in that, you do end up in difficult situations, but trying to jump on top and say, I know why you're mad because of this, and I have it, but you don't give them a chance to open up how it affects them. You're just banging your head up against the wall. And I just did a whole bunch of different things, more than any of my peers. And I hit a certain point where I couldn't really see the next thing I wanted to do that was going to bring me happiness. And so I made the leap at the end of 2022 to do a voluntary separation.
Mm-hmm.
And in my mind, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go out there and kick all kinds of tail because I've done all these impressive things. And I just need to start talking to people. And all of a sudden, the more I talk to people, somebody's going to fall for they're going to be impressed by me. And then they're going to bring me in. And I spent, you know, maybe 3 full months in that mode of how much LinkedIn action and how many meetings can I get and how much can I pull here and how much can I pull there. And quite frankly, it was starting to realize that it wasn't really working.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a coach that I found, Scott Ballard, who I'll always bring up his name. He runs this confidence coach consulting, and connected with him immediately. But Charles, I don't need a life coach, man. Like, I don't need these things. That's
Is
for
that right? Is that right?
weak people, right?
I see.
But the more I found and talked to impressive people, they all had a team. They all had people behind them, supporting them, keeping them on track. You need a coach. The greatest athletes in the world need a coach.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it was a hard decision to make because it wasn't free. But Scott says if you don't have anything vested, you're not going to work on it. So I hired Scott and started working with him, and he taught me about intrinsic confidence, I guess is the term I would use. But it's like,
Mhm.
what are your gifts? Not I can hit a golf ball farther than most people, but like, what are the ways that you live your life and the person that you are that is uniquely different than other people that makes you effective and gifted? It's
Mhm.
not a single bar where you're saying, I'm the highest, I'm the biggest, I'm the strongest. It's like, this is the mix, the
Mhm.
unique thing of me. And then what do I want to do? I got maybe 10, 15 more years to do. And it's like, oh, I want to make $1 million. No, 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 no. Like, day in and day out, what do you want to spend your time doing?
Right.
Because that is what's most important. And so I built that up in working with Scott. And maybe looking back on Intel a little bit, I had good managers and less good managers and great experiences and kind of less experience, whatever. But a lot of people taught me and mentored me, and they taught me how to be influential to get things done and how to be effective and how to be seen by your peers and be able to. But nobody taught me how to internalize my confidence so that it was something that I owned. It was all still based on what approval am I getting? What is the
Mhm.
response I'm getting? How am I, I was still very keyed into that external validation for the efforts that I was making. And nobody taught me how to build it for myself when I was at Intel. And I would suspect most people at large companies don't get much of that either.
Sure. And you could even argue that maybe you can't be taught this and you need to learn it yourself. Perhaps, young Jedi,
Yes.
this is the lesson is this, you learn it yourself. I wrote down one quote from you. You said, I couldn't see the next thing I'd do that would bring me happiness. That's a really
Yeah.
powerful sentence. And I'm wondering if people listening to this podcast right now, uh, if you feel that, maybe that's the inflection point. Maybe that's the nudge where the linear path is just not going to work anymore. So something fundamental has changed. And in your case, you chose to leave a stable 23-year, career at a really,
Yeah.
powerful, successful corporation and take a big risk. But in order to do that, you needed to internalize this confidence, and you realized that was an impediment, and so you went to work on that as well. So I think there's a lot of lessons. We're talking a lot about Intel, but it's not Intel. This is all of us on our professional journey and then figuring out the next move. And there were some interesting insights in what you had to say.
Yeah. Let me say a big word too is fear.
Hmm.
Um, Fear with a pause. It's scary, right? Like, I got kids and college funds and mortgages and aging parents and a lot of people are riding on me,
Yeah.
and to let them down by making a big decision for myself is very, very scary.
Sure.
And with the people I've known and working in all these companies, I started talking to people more in this way. But like, how do you feel about your job? Are you loving what you do? And there's so many people who are like,
Right.
this other company bought it and blah blah blah, and but we got the daycare bills and the this and the that, and there's somewhere where they know they're gonna make it,
Hmm.
but they're just not happy.
Yeah.
And in order to get from that stage to the free stage, you have to go to the other side of that fear.
Yeah.
And you build confidence by surviving fear.
It's fair. And I think the fear is grounded in something real. If you take on the protector and provider roles, that's a
Mm-hmm.
responsibility, and it's important to take it seriously. And I guess if I hear you correctly, the question is, how do you meet the commitments you've made to others and also live? Which brings me to
Yeah,
the last question I want to ask you. So, well, let's talk about the trap. This is how I introduced this podcast.
sure.
So as a business leader, like, have you found it difficult to pursue your professional goals and also take good care of yourself physically and emotionally? So many executives I work with have fallen into this ambitious person's trap. That's where you trash your physical health and emotional health in pursuit of your professional goals. And by the way, if you can't be a good role model on this, it's also fine to be a good object lesson of what not to do. So there's no shame here.
Yeah.
We're all, but have you been able to avoid the ambitious person's trap? And if so, how?
Um, I'll say my first 6 months of being the CEO of Raytech, my
Mhm.
wife and kids were finishing the school year back in Portland. We hadn't had to move. And I stayed in like a little apartment, and I could do whatever I wanted, compared to normal life.
Sure.
And um, I I was like, I'm gonna, I'm finally gonna bring some of my weight down, and I have these aches and pains, and like I'm gonna go to the gym, and I'm gonna so, but
Yeah.
I didn't. I worked really, really hard. I worked really late, and when I got done, it was all about trying to kind of reward myself for my efforts that I had made.
Yeah.
And what I um when my family showed up, and I got a chance to keep talking to Scott, and I think you know this he's like, I'm going to go visit you in a hospital. And I was
You
like,
could
ha
see
ha
the
ha.
trajectory you're on.
You could see the trajectory.
Yeah.
And I was like, ha ha. He's like, no, Ed, no, I know people like you, and I visit them in the hospital.
Yeah.
And it kind of shook me out. And when my family showed up, and my son, they were starting school, and he wanted to play tennis. And I played tennis as a kid. I started 6 years old. My dad, because I had so much energy, he got a cut down wood tennis racket and gave it to me. And there was a wall at the school across the street. And I would just bang the tennis ball against the wall. But I played up through college, and, but injuries and not being happy with how good I was, I stopped. And all of a sudden I got out there with him, and I started hitting tennis balls. And I was like, wait, this is one of the great loves of my life.
Yeah.
And I needed to get my body back. And so I did PT on my shoulder. I've lost 50 pounds. Like, I've got myself back in shape and being able to play competitive tennis again. And that's a bit of the story. But the techniques behind that are to really carve out those times and practices that get you mentally in control. You're mentally being pulled in a lot of directions and unanticipated situations, but the mindset of being back in control and being the best person that you can be for the people that need you
Right.
has has a practice element to it. I learned from you as we met about the 30 seconds when you get in the garage, right? Instead of spinning, driving traffic home, boom, what's going on? Why isn't this picking up? Well, I don't know. Like,
Right.
you need to shift from, my daughter doesn't need a CEO talking to her when she's upset about something a girl said to her.
Right.
Okay, here's the 3-point plan of how we're going to get back. Like, no, she just wants a different person.
Right.
And having those pauses and having those carved out times and having, some meditation practice of, I'm feeling, I'm going to bring it down. If you have a meeting and the door's closed or something, and then you just, okay, I'm just going to take 3 minutes. Like, those regrounding practices allow you to do the physical things that you need to do to take care of yourself physically. And I'm an imperfect student, and it's just, I think I told you at one point, like, I suck at meditation, and you said it doesn't matter if you suck.
I said it's not a competitive sport. I said, what do you suck at? That even makes sense. That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, but you're being asked a lot is being asked of you, and if you just use yourself as you're just the dependent variable of everything, it doesn't last.
Okay, and I want to be clear, just to let everybody know if they didn't catch Ed's insight there. So that I call this the driveway moment. And so you come home from work, you pull into your driveway, you turn your car off, and before you get out of your car, you pause, you take a deep breath, you take your work hat off metaphorically, and you just center yourself. Take some breaths and just shift into the person you want to be when you walk in the door. And that's a real gift to the people you love and you live with. So, all right, Ed, so thank you very much. So what is the best way for people to get in touch with you or to learn about Raytech equipment? Where would you send them?
Well, Raytech is at REYTEK.com. And we'll be happy if anybody's in semiconductor or pharmaceuticals or working in clean room environments. That's the business side of it. I'm on LinkedIn under Ed Kuyper. And so if anybody has any follow-up conversations, or you've been in the position of being in a big company, or you're facing the fear, I'd be open to talk. And it's just a real honor to be able to talk to you, Charles. And it's such an important part of what we all need.
No, thank you, Ed. Well, so it's been an honor to have you on the show. I really appreciate it. So as a reminder to everyone listening, this show is sponsored by the 90% Rule, helping leaders escape the grind of the ambitious person's trap and instead spend 90% of your finite time and energy on things you like, you're good at, and you find meaningful. To learn more, go to executivementorcharlescott.com. And until next episode, go beyond your perceived limits and live the 90% life.